It's hard to design products by a focus group because many people don't know what they want until you show it to them. This passionate pioneer expected perfection from himself and those around him. With innovation, ingenuity, and excellence, he fixed the fortune of a floundering company he co-founded on focus, empathy, and an intimate connection with the consumer, completely and categorically changing the world that we knew into the world that we know. And this person I speak of is Steve Jobs. In 1976, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak co-founded the Apple Company in Steve Jobs' garage. In 1976, they sold the first Apple computer, which was the Apple I. It did not have a case, a keyboard, nor a mouse. And in 1977, they manufactured and sold the Apple II. This time it did have a case, a keyboard, and a mouse. And it was the first home computer that actually utilized colored graphics. In 1985, Jobs was working at the Macintosh division at Apple Computer. I know many of you thinking this guy co-founded Apple. Why isn't he leading Apple, or why isn't he the CEO? But head of the Macintosh division. Better left to history, right? It wouldn't be that intriguing if it wasn't. In 1985, Steve Jobs was fired from Apple for having a disagreement with the CEO of the company that he founded. After being fired from Apple for having a disagreement with the CEO, Steve Jobs started on his next adventure, or his next venture, which was the NEXT computer company that Steve Jobs founded. It wasn't nearly as successful as Apple, but it still kept his head above water, still kept him in the tech industry. And also Steve Jobs had his hand in Pixar. Steve Jobs had acquired Pixar from George Lucas, the guy who makes Star Wars. In 1997, Steve Jobs was asked to come back to Apple. The company wasn't doing so well. They needed a new direction. They needed vision. And Steve Jobs was the man who had vision. Accepting the position of CEO, Steve Jobs told the board he wants to run the company his way and his way only, with no excuses. And in 1987, he executed his vision. Jobs turned around the computer division of Apple, making the iMacs, rebranding the Macintosh as iMacs, changing the colorways, had new and exciting colors, exotic colors other computer companies like HP and Dell did not have. He also was focused on handhelds. Anybody remember the iPod, how widely popular the iPod was? Jobs envisioned it. The iPod was to Apple what the Walkman was to Sony. It revolutionized the music industry. You have something this big in your pocket that had 10,000 songs on it. Amazingly enough, Steve Jobs never invented anything himself. He surrounded himself with intelligent people, engineers, designers. Steve Jobs was just a visionary, the man behind all these ideas. And his biggest idea was yet to come. Unknown to us, Steve Jobs was cooking up something big, something huge, something that would revolutionize an industry. And that industry would be the cell phone industry. Steve Jobs envisioned a cell phone you didn't have to use with a stylus, but it had a touchscreen. And in 2007, the first iPhone was released with huge acclaim. And that changed everything about the phone and the computing industry. You had this touchscreen, and the touchscreen was only 3.5 inches. Now the screens are getting up to 7, 8 inches in height and length and width. But at the time, it was revolutionary, it was colorful, it was brilliant, it was bright. It was something new. It was the new kid on the block. That's what Steve Jobs brought to the industry, and that's who Steve Jobs is. A visionary focused on giving people, the consumer, what they want. Things they didn't even know they wanted. That quote I said earlier, a lot of people don't know what they want until you show it to them. That was Steve Jobs. That's who he was. Someone that gave you what you want that you didn't even know you wanted. Brilliant salesman, extraordinary visionary, and a remarkable man. Now, I hope I told you a little bit about Steve Jobs and who he was, and about how he changed the lives of us all. Because a lot of us wouldn't be having these cell phones like they are if it wasn't for Steve Jobs.